There's this whole 5 to 10 year period on average before you actually get into menopause where, pardon my French, the doo-doo really hits the fan.
I'm Jill Angelo, host of the Genneve podcast series for women's health in midlife. I speak with the most forward-thinking experts in the health and wellness industries. These experts are helping women 40 plus feel confident and in control of their health in the most vibrant years of their lives. So join us on this journey of women's health. So many women aren't familiar with the term perimenopause, even though they're likely in it. Doctor of Pharmacy, Dr. Anna Garrett, wants women to be informed about perimenopause so they understand the changes their bodies are going through and can make decisions for their future health. She wrote the book Perimenopause, The Savvy Sister's Guide to Hormone Harmony. She talked with me about perimenopause, hormones, and why you probably need this information sooner than you think. Listen in. You've got an interesting background. What led you to actually working with women in perimenopause and menopause?
Well, that's actually a really good question. I formerly worked at our local hospital, and as part of my job, I did health coaching with the employees because that was one of the benefits that was included in the wellness program. And I seemed to get all of the women who were 48, 49, who would come in and say, I'm about to turn 50 and X, Y, and Z is going on. And a lot of them had health challenges that were coming up that were really affecting their quality of work and their quality of life. And I was like, this is something I need to know about and dig into more. And at the time, I was about 45. So I too was experiencing insomnia was my personal little piece of perimenopause hell. So I dug into it more. I did the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine endocrinology program and really upped my level of knowledge at that point and decided to step away and become and start my own business and work with women who were going through perimenopause and menopause because I just saw so much suffering that was going on and women weren't getting any answers anywhere and they were just hugely frustrated by that, as you well know.
Yeah, that's great. So you've worked obviously with hundreds and thousands of women. What drove you to write your book?
Well, as I looked around, I really saw a need for more information about perimenopause because everybody thinks the whole thing is just menopause. And what they don't realize is there's this whole 5 to 10 year period on average before you actually get into menopause where, pardon my French, the doo-doo really hits the fan. And that's because perimenopause is characterized by huge swings in hormones, whereas menopause is more of a low hormone situation, and they look very different. And women can be as young as their late 30s when this starts, and they think they're going crazy, and they go to their doctor, and they get dismissed with, oh, no, you're too young for this. Here, have some birth control pills. Here, have some antidepressants. Here, have some Xanax. And nobody's getting anywhere and getting the relief that they need.
One thing, like on the front of your book, and I'm looking at it right now, you say, you're not too young. Talk a little bit about age, because that is totally, people think that menopause is an old woman's thing. So talk a little bit about age. What are you seeing? Are women starting earlier? Why did you say you're not too young?
Because that of the things that women tell me about what their doctors tell them is probably the number one thing if they're between, say, 38 and 45. And I've had clients come to me that were as young as 35 that start to experience period changes and insomnia and weight gain and anxiety actually is a really big thing that kind of comes out of nowhere. And I want women to realize that this stuff can start really early and to be proactive in the approach that they take. That's actually my biggest marketing challenge is getting women who don't realize that they need it to realize that they need it and to be able to be informed so that when things start to change, they can go in and talk to their healthcare professional and have an educated conversation about what they want for themselves and to know what the options are.
Yeah, I think, normalizing it is such a huge thing. And I know you said in your book, women constantly ask you if they're normal. Like why do we have this sense that, is it because we're unprepared? This notion of normalcy is a big deal. And we see that amongst women who come to Genneve as well. Like, am I going crazy? Is this normal? Like, how do you position that with the women that you work with?
Well, so there are so many flavors of normal or common in perimenopause. And so really no two women look alike in their experience. I tell people everything is normal when you hit perimenopause because it can be. And I want women to not feel, shame about reaching out or to feel like they're going crazy because, the hormone shifts are so huge and, everything is on the table and to not be afraid to ask questions. So, we both have menopause groups, and I'm sure that you have seen the questions that you get asked in there and that I get asked in my group, and it is all over the map. And what I also want women to understand is not everything is related to perimenopause. So it's like, my foot hurts. Is that related to perimenopause? Probably not. But I don't ever say things that are impossible because you never know.
One thing I love the most about your book, it's almost going to be a reference guide for me and for anyone that I gift it to, because you list kind of all the symptoms. Like there's numbers put on, like there's 34 symptoms of menopause, but you list them and give a little paragraph descriptor of just really the random things that can happen throughout perimenopause, which you would never connect. One thing that you said that really struck me was, the key to the kingdom is managing stress. And it seems like, can you talk about this connection between stress and menopause, or stress and perimenopause, I should say, because stress just exists in all facets of life, but why is it such a bigger deal during this phase of a woman's life that she really work on managing it?
Well, it's a big deal because of the role cortisol plays in balancing hormones. So cortisol is one of our stress hormones, and when you're chronically stressed, your cortisol levels rise, and that can interfere with sleep, which then affects hormone balance. It can block your progesterone receptors, which means even if you have enough progesterone, it may not be working well. It affects your insulin levels, which then impacts weight gain. So there's just a whole interplay of all of these hormones, and your body will produce cortisol at the expense of all of your other hormones. So initially your cortisol levels will rise, and then eventually they start to come down as your stress axis doesn't work as well as it should. And that creates a situation where your body needs more cortisol, and so it will pull in pregnenolone, which is the mother hormone, and make cortisol at the expense of the whole other side of your hormone cascade. So it affects your estrogen, your testosterone, your progesterone, and your DHEA. So controlling stress, to me, is the number one thing that women need to work on.
All right. In terms of, working on stress, there's obviously all sorts of ways in terms of mindfulness and exercise and activity, but you're a doctor of pharmacy, you're a huge advocate of supplements, and you write about a lot of different options in the book. How, when you're working with a woman, do you kind of help her step through the right supplements and or whether or not she needs to get a prescription for an actual a prescription level strength drug?
So I basically have a 3-pronged approach that I take when I work with people, and the first step is lifestyle. So we look at the way my client is eating, we look at the way she's sleeping, we work on any of those things that need to be cleaned up. And then the second step is to look at supplementation. So there are, in my book, I mentioned my foundational 5. Magnesium is huge because of the depletion that has gone on in the soil. So our foods don't contain a lot of magnesium, and it's hard to get sources in the diet. And it's used in so many cellular processes, and it's so helpful for sleep for many, many women, myself included. I am a big fan of adaptogenic herbs because when it comes to stress management, they help modulate that cortisol response, whether it's high or low. I'm a fan of vitamin D because bone health is so important to think about during that whole perimenopause and menopause transition. I'm a fan of B complex because stress depletes your B vitamins, as does hormone replacement and birth control pills. And then I also I like chasteberry because that's an herb that can help balance that progesterone to estrogen ratio. And obviously there are a million other supplements beyond that. And, I'm a fan of using things when it's appropriate to use them. And I'm not a fan of, loading up somebody's plate with handfuls of supplements. I like to try to be very selective and use ones that kill more than one bird with a stone. So, for instance, the B vitamins can cover a lot of ground, as can the adaptogenic herbs.
There's been a lot of news around sourcing supplements or getting high quality ones. What's your advice on that, and where do you source yours from?
This is one of those situations where I believe you get what you pay for. And so there has been a lot of news about supplements that don't contain any of the active ingredients, and they tend to be sold at lower cost stores. I like ones that have third-party verification of their purity and standardization. I get mine through Welevate, which used to be called Emerson Ecologics, and they're basically a warehouser for a lot of the reputable brands like Metagenics and Pure Encapsulations, Designs for Health, all of the higher-end brands that have a lot of purity standards and research behind them. And, I know that there's not a lot of research on a lot of supplements. And that's because there's really not a lot of money in doing clinical trials on supplements because they're very expensive to conduct. So, just because there aren't clinical trials doesn't mean something doesn't work. So anyway, yes, that's where I get mine. There's a company called Full Script that also is essentially the same as Welevate.
That's helpful. You always want to know, where do you go? So, one thing as I was going through your book, obviously you've got communities that you're part of. You hear a lot of negatives, the weight gain, the lousy sleep, the low libido, it all sounds bad. Let's flip that around. What are some of the positives of perimenopause, and how do you help women kind of focus on whether it's an end goal or the positives that are coming about in this part of life?
Well, I'm a firm believer that you get more of what you focus on. So if you believe that perimenopause is going to be a horrible experience for you, chances are it probably will be. I think that perimenopause and midlife in general offer a great opportunity for reinvention. I mean, I didn't start this business until I was 50 years old. So, it's a very powerful time for me, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I also think that it opens up a lot of avenues that women don't have when they have kids at home. So there's less, hopefully, financial pressure. There are fewer time pressures with family, and you can go and travel and explore and figure out what you want for the next third of your life. So I think it really is, all in what you make it. And for me, I'm not going to sit around and moan and groan because, that's just not how I am. And I realize that symptomatically people really can have a hard time, but it's the ones who have a hard time and refuse to look at doing anything differently that I have a hard time working with. I like to work with people who are ready to take the bull by the horns and ready to do the work that it takes to make the habit changes that then improve the quality of life.
Typically, when a woman comes to you, how long does that habit change timeline look? Or if she comes to you and says, okay, I'm ready to make a change, what is she signing up to commit to?
Well, so I have a couple of different ways I work with people. So for some people, I will just do testing and create a plan for them, and then they go and implement it on their own. My preference is to work with somebody at least 6 months, because I find that doing the tweaking of the plan and doing the habit change, especially if somebody wants to lose weight, it just takes time. And really having that accountability, it's like me with writing a book. I needed somebody to keep me accountable and to keep me on track. And that's what I do for my clients. I'm fine with hand holding and basically doing whatever it needs to help them achieve the success that they are looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is the book going to be part of your program in the women that you work with going forward?
Yes, of course.
Well, I have to say, it really is a handbook that you read it, but in terms of a reference guide that you can go back to, I think that's what makes it, a perimenopause handbook that you kind of want as something that you might go through it a couple times, or you might just come back and, I've dog-eared certain pages around things that were new to me, especially on the supplement side, or especially on reading about the symptoms. I think you've done a great job there. Can you explain just why you took that approach? In addition to the great stories that you use to really start every chapter. But can you talk a little bit more? To me, it feels like a real reference guide.
Well, thank you for asking that question, because when I sat down to start writing it, I wanted it to be the what to expect when you're expecting for perimenopause. Because when we had kids, if we had kids, we all went out and bought that book like the first thing we did once we found out we were pregnant. And I was like, somebody needs to write something that women can have in their hands and refer to when they get to this particular stage of their reproductive life, so that they can look and go, oh, okay, I can do this, or, oh, okay, that's not out of the realm of possibility. So I wanted it to be a reference.
That's fantastic. Well, it is indeed.
Thank you.
In closing, what are 3 resources, in addition, obviously, to your book, that you point women to in terms of information, support, resources that you've used? Where do you generally refer women? Obviously, in addition to, Perimenopause, the Savvy Sister's Guide to Hormone Harmony.
I have gotten information from a couple of places. Well, I think I've read every book that's ever been written about menopause, so there's that. But Dr. John Lee, who unfortunately passed away in 1996, and his work is, it's older, but a lot of the points that he makes are still very valid as far as learning about perimenopause. He's got a book that is entitled What Your Doctor May Not Tell You About Perimenopause. He also has one about menopause, and he has one about breast cancer, and there may be another one that I'm forgetting. And that's kind of where I started. I love Sarah Gottfried's work. I trained through her hormone cure training program, and got to know a lot of people in that program. And then Dr. Christiane Northrup, I think, is sort of like the goddess of menopause. She's more slanted toward the menopause side than the peri side, but she has a lot of wisdom when it comes to that, and a lot of things to think about in addition to the physical symptoms. And so I really like her work as well. Kind of finally, one last question. This is a little bit of a different one, but do you think that socially we're starting to get more comfortable talking about menopause and perimenopause? I personally, obviously, I think about this every day because it's what we do at Genneve, but I've seen more op-eds in the New York Times, or I see more authors speaking out about it, about their own stories, or doctors like you writing guides to perimenopause. Like, where do you see the conversation shifting? And do you see it happening more, there being more conversation about this? There is definitely, there's more conversation about it than there was 8 years ago when I started my business, which I think is a great thing. And I think part of it is that the women who are now writing the op-eds and the Huffington Post pieces are, women who weren't used to being silenced, for lack of a better term, as they were, entering their 20s and 30s. And now all of a sudden they're looking around going, what the hell is this? And why is nobody talking about it? And they're bold and brave and willing to just like put it all out there. And I think it is a conversation that is long overdue and definitely something that needs to be addressed in workplace wellness programs as well. I did a podcast recently on a workplace wellness summit, and it's just, it needs to be as front and center as like diabetes or hypertension or any of the things that are always included in wellness programs. So I think the conversation is definitely shifting.
That's great. I'm glad to hear you talk about the workplace, because I think the stat is 20% of today's workforce are women of menopausal age. So it's high time that we have that kind of support in the workplace.
Well, especially when they end up quitting their jobs because they can't deal with what's going on physically, or they get brain fog that's so bad that they can't function adequately anymore. And it's crazy because there are things we can do about that. So that makes me sad.
Yeah. Well, and also for businesses, they've invested in these employees. They're losing good people. So lots of work there yet to do. Where can women find your book?
I have a webpage, perimenopaussebook.com. And on that page, there are a number of outlets that can be accessed: Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kobo. I'm not sure what else is on there, but that's where they can find it.
All right, sounds good. And they can find you. I know you are active in Geneve's Midlife and Menopause Solutions Facebook group. Thank you for being there. You've taken on a lot of women's questions in that group, so thank you. And you also run a Facebook group as well.
I do.
Called
the Hormone Harmony Club.
Excellent. Great. So women can find you in both places. And again, the book is titled Perimenopause, The Savvy Sister's Guide to Hormone Harmony. Thank you, Dr. Anna. Thank you for all the work you do. I know we've known you for a couple of years now and have followed your work and are just big fans and are so grateful for what you do for women in this time of life. So congratulations on the new book, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be on today.
Thanks to Dr. Anna Garrett for speaking with me today. As a reminder, her book is titled Perimenopause, The Savvy Sister's Guide to Hormone Harmony. It's available now on Amazon. You can learn more about Dr. Anna at her website at drannagarrett.com. That's Dr. Anna Garrett, and Garrett is spelled GARRETT.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening to the Genneve podcast series. We welcome your feedback at genneve.com. That's GENNEVE.com. You can follow us on Facebook and subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher, and you'll never miss an episode. The Genneve podcast series is produced by Shannon Perry, theme music by Smitty. And until next time, watch the Genneve website for new stories and offers all dedicated to women's midlife health.